I'm David Scandura,
I'm Justice Burkett.
and today we're here to find out, is Blue Valentine the greatest movie ever made?
Sir, please, there's no sex in my taxi. Do not touch the young lady in my taxi.
Welcome to The Greatest Movie Ever Made, the show where we watch a movie and tell you if it's the greatest movie ever made.
Little strum on the ukulele here.
A movie that is so thoroughly entertaining and compelling that while you're watching it, it's the only thing that matters in the world. I'm David Scandura, and I'm joined as always by my co-host and guy who is really, really glad he's not Ryan Gosling in this movie, Justice Burkett.
Yeah, man. Very glad that I am not Ryan Gosling in this movie, of course, because he's in a loveless relationship with his wife, a thing that I thankfully cannot relate to. My relationship with the podmaster is a lot better than this marriage in this movie. But also, like, I have been Ryan Gosling in this movie, like him, especially in like the younger scenes with the two of them. He's exhibiting a lot of justice at 19, 20 years old type behaviors, which both I was able to relate to him, and I was also immensely frustrated by him because I was like, man, grow the fuck up. We'll get into it, but yeah, safe to say this man's life is not a life that I would want to be living.
Yeah, I think any straight white male above a certain age range could probably relate to at least a little bit of Ryan Gosling in this movie.
He's definitely a recognizable. He's got a lot of recognizable characteristics to most. Most white men of a certain age, probably most heterosexual, white men of a certain age, where, when before you mature a little bit, you definitely have certain ideas about what it means to be a man in a heterosexual romantic relationship. And a lot of those ideas are instilled in you by society. And it turns out a lot of that is fucking bullshit that you should discard and not allow to guide the trajectory of your life. Yeah.
Justice, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. There's not a lot to update you on,
right?
Because to just clue our listeners in, David and I are both in a theater production that is coming up, and we're about to both get pretty busy in the next couple of weeks with rehearsal and performance for that. So we are recording this episode the day after we recorded last week's episode. So I saw David yesterday, and there's not a lot to fill him in on.
No big updates in the last 24 hours.
Still doing good. I got my nice little romantic glass of red wine here for this record, because we're covering, it's a very sad, fraught romance, but I would say this still falls into the genre category of a romantic film. So I'm drinking the part here with my little glass of Malbec. But yeah, other than that, really, there's not really anything to fill you in on. After yesterday, I did some stuff around the house and watched the movie for today's episode. So, David, how are you doing?
Bad, because I watched Blue Valentine and
fair.
it made me sad.
Fair.
And my media recommendations are literally anything except Blue Valentine.
Unless you want to, I guess, potentially feel extremely sad.
Yeah,
in which case.
But otherwise, there's the whole of media and art at your fingertips. Do something else. So my recommendations are probably not Mein Kampf. Don't read Mein Kampf.
Yeah.
And don't watch Blue Valentine because it will make you depressed.
Yes, yeah. I would agree with you that Mein Kampf is a worse choice than Blue Valentine.
So let's just get into the movie.
Yep.
This is Blue Valentine from 2010, directed by Cianfrance. I watched this last year. I have also seen his other film, Place Beyond the Pines. He's also directed Light Between Oceans and the miniseries I Know This Much Is True. This is his first film, and watched it last year. Really connected with me, and glad that we could talk about it on the show.
Yeah, the director of this movie, Cianfrance. First of all, he hasn't done a whole lot. Like you said, it's basically this and Place Beyond the Pines and a couple other little things. Have you seen pictures of this guy?
Yes.
He looks like old balding Ryan Gosling, like aged up Ryan Gosling in this movie. That is exactly what the man looks like in real life.
Yeah.
Which which is very interesting to me. The Podmaster and I were kind of like speculating on that and being like, is this a bit of a self-insert here? Because this guy looks exactly like that.
Well, he wrote it after his parents divorced in his early 20s. And it was something that I guess he had been afraid of for a long time, and it finally happened kind of just as he was starting to develop his own relationships with people and starting to figure out who he was as a romantic partner.
Yeah.
So he kind of wrote this as a way to process that and go and understand those feelings.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. That also kind of leads me into just an overall thought I had about this movie, which is like this fits into a subgenre of romantic movies that are divorce movies, right? Like this movie, Marriage Story, Kramer versus Kramer, stuff like that is its own kind of type of romance film, romantic drama film, the divorce movie, right? And it is interesting to me watching a movie like this as someone for whom divorce has not really touched my life in any meaningful way. I feel like I experience this subgenre very differently than a lot of people because, divorce is very common. Like, 50% or a little bit more of all marriages like end in divorce, right? And so lots of people, especially in the US where divorce is pretty prevalent, have personal experience with it. Either, they've been divorced, their parents have been divorced, they have, siblings or grandparents or aunts and uncles that they're close to who have gone through that. I'm kind of in the weird, unique place where nobody in my family gets divorced. Both or all four pairs of, is that how many grandparents you have? Both pairs of grandparents. There are not four. There are four individuals. Totaling two couples. I've only taken one sip of this Malbec, so it's not the alcohol. I'm just stupid.
We're not math experts here.
No. Anyway, neither of my grandparents ever got divorced. Those marriages lasted until one, and then eventually one of them died. Right. I have two living grandparents, and then my parents have been together, since their early 20s. Right. My brother is married, and, so far so good. I'm married, so far so good. All of my aunts and uncles, with the exception of like one, and I have a bunch of aunts and uncles. My dad has a ton of siblings. So I have there are so many aunts and uncles, and almost all of them have only been married once and have just been with that person for a very long time. And so it's always interesting to me watching stories about divorce because it's like a thing that I know happens, but I have no personal connection to it. It's almost like I kind of approach these stories as a total outsider, and I have no way to directly relate to it other than just they're human beings and I'm a human being and I can be empathetic on that level. But otherwise, I have no personal experience to draw from. So just this type of movie is always very interesting to me.
And I don't watch a ton of romantic movies, whether that be romantic comedies or romantic dramas anyway. So that's another level where romance is not the type of story that I'm normally interested in. Unless it has something else alongside it, an action film or a horror movie. So there's that. And then, I have no real experience with divorce either. My parents have been together forever. And there's been some divorces and strained marriages in my extended family, but those are all people who I'm not as close to.
Right.
So I haven't really felt the effects of. But I do have experience with friends who got married very young, and then a few years later were trapped in loveless marriages that ended in divorce. Or even just relationships like this one, where you're just kind of circling the drain with each other, waiting for the other one to break.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, that's a good point. Right, because it's even though divorce as as something that people go through is not something that I feel like I have a lot of experience with with the people close to me, like let alone, you know, in my own life. You're right. Like there are relationships that never reach the marriage stage that still do kind of hit these same beats that these people hit in this movie. And like, that's definitely something that I have seen people go through, you know, who I'm friends with or who I'm close with as well. Right. So yeah, I guess I'm not totally coming at it from like the alien perspective, but it does sometimes feel that way in this genre. Right. Because I'm like, unhappy marriage, I don't know what that's like. Could never be me. Knock on wood here, because, you know, life is long. But, you know, I feel very happy and comfortable in my own relationship. I've been very, very blessed in that regard. But also, like, and this is a thing that I'll touch on more when we're talking about kind of the movie itself. But also, like, it's not necessarily luck, right? Because relationships are a lot of fucking work, you know? And I know a lot of people say that, but the thing that I latched onto watching these two people in this movie is it's like relationships are work, but most of the work is not work that you're doing to reconcile with the other person. Most of the work that you're doing in a healthy relationship that keeps it healthy is work on yourself, right? Is introspection, you know, self-reflection, and growing and changing as a person alongside your partner based on what you want to be, right? And also what they need you to be, right? And I think that that's why a lot of relationships fail is because either through that process of self-reflection, introspection, right? You determine that the person that you are or that the person you want to be doesn't square with the person that you're with, right? That's one problem. Or the bigger problem, and I think the problem that the people in this movie have, you never do that self-reflection or that introspection. You try to mold yourself to your idea of what the other person wants you to be without like considering what you want to be and who you are, right? And I feel like that's a lot of what makes the relationships in general go sour, right? Is focusing too much on what the other person wants from you and not how to make yourself more the person that you want to be, both in the relationship and just in general, right? Just a thing I was thinking about a lot while I was watching this movie. Because I was like, these people fucking really need to go to therapy.
Yeah, I don't have the type of relationship experience that you do. So I don't, there's not a ton of that I am bringing to this movie. But what I enjoy about this movie, or what I find so compelling about this movie, is this is a slow death by 1,000 cuts of a relationship. There is no big fight. There is no big betrayal that causes this relationship to crumble. It just has been crumbling slowly and steadily in the little moments, in the quiet moments, in the stagnation of their growth as a couple. And I haven't seen Marriage Story. Marriage Story was like probably the big movie of this, you know, genre of divorce movies that came out recently, and I didn't see it. Mm-hmm. And I hadn't even seen the clip that they released before the movie came out, where Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson are fighting.
Yes, where the many memes, the scene that launched a million memes, where he punches his fist through the wall.
Yeah, and he goes, "Every day I wake up and I wish you were dead."
Yeah.
And I watched that this morning, and I can't speak to the movie's quality. I haven't seen it. I hated that scene.
Okay.
I thought the performances were great.
Yeah.
But the writing was so... I knew everything about these characters in 4 minutes, to the point where I felt like I didn't need to see the movie.
Right.
And I haven't been through divorce. I haven't experienced this kind of relationship. But it felt so unrealistic. The things that they were bringing up, the way the conversation was progressing, the way the argument was progressing. And this movie never gets to that point.
Right.
Its big moments are so small and so subtle. And I think that's what makes it so powerful, is it's like, this isn't in a way, this is a big moment for their relationship. But at the same time, this could just be every other weekend that they have together.
Right. Yeah, I do definitely agree with you on that. The best part of this movie is sort of the realism of it, like it is pretty raw and real. And I think that is definitely like its strongest element to me. And that's really drawn from the performances. I mean, like Michelle Williams, Ryan Gosling, two of our greatest living actors, in my opinion. They're, it's hard to overstate how good Michelle Williams is in everything. And we're big Gosling fans here as well.
Yeah, he's literally me.
Yeah,
so.
We love some Ryan. And I like both of them. I think totally unimpeachable in this movie in terms of their performances. They're doing literally everything right, and that feeds into like the realism that you're talking about. Like these do feel like very authentic people.
Yeah,
right?
And Derek Cianfrance, worked for a long time with Gosling and Williams separately on discussing the characters and developing the script. They worked on this movie for like 12 years, partially because he was having trouble finding funding, but it went through so many drafts, and the process of developing the characters took so long. There was a lot of improvisation with the early scenes in the movie, or the flashback scenes of the early days of their relationship, with long nights of filming where he wanted to film them actually get to know each other as people, as well as characters.
Yeah.
And the house in the movie, Ryan Gosling and Michelle Williams lived there together for a month, and also lived there with the young actress playing their daughter in this movie, to kind of build memories and build a common history with each other, that they could then draw on when working, on some of the more difficult scenes in this film. It originally received an NC-17 due to the sexual content, but it was then appealed and released with an R rating with no cuts, which is wild because the sexual content in this movie is like nowhere near the level of something like Crash, which did get released with NC-17.
Right. Yeah.
It released with a $1 million budget and got $16 million at the box office. Michelle Williams was nominated for Best Actress, but did not win. Yeah, she lost to Natalie Portman in Black Swan.
Yeah, which, like, fair, I guess. That is a great performance. It's been a while since I've seen that movie.
Yeah,
but I remember being pretty blown away by that. Michelle Williams is amazing in this movie, but I guess if you're going to lose to somebody, losing to Natalie Portman in Black Swan is like, that's all right, I think.
Let's get into the movie.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
So we got to talk about Deadbeat, Ryan Gosling.
Yes.
Dean. The movie starts with him asleep while his daughter is running around outside looking for their dog.
Yes. And immediately I'm like, oh, fuck. There's a missing dog. There's probably going to be a dead dog. I already don't like where this is going.
Yeah, really starts things off on a cheery note.
It sets the tone for sure, where you're like, okay, this is just going to be Bummer Town front to back, right? Yeah, so they're, looking for the dog. Then we go to the breakfast table, right? And Ryan Gosling is, feeding their kid breakfast. The kid doesn't like it. It's like bland oatmeal or whatever. And immediately there is so much hostility between the two of them. It is like very, very tense, like right away between Michelle Williams and Ryan Gosling, right? Their characters are Dean and Cindy, right? And Dean is, being a big old goof with the kid. Like he's the parent who is the best friend, right? And Michelle Williams is doing the actual parenting. And there's like already tension and conflict just from like Ryan Gosling's like, oh, eat your breakfast like a leopard, like slurp the raisins off the table. And Michelle Williams is like, she needs to eat with a spoon, like time is limited, we got to get her to school, like let's fucking go here. And he's like basically to the kid being like, oh, like mommy's being a buzzkill is kind of the vibe, right? That's not exactly what he says, but he's immediately like weaponizing his friendship with their kid. against her to make her look like the bad guy. And like right away, I was just like, oh, fuck, this guy is being very mean. So yeah, it's like tense right from the jump.
Yeah, and I need to emphasize how much of a deadbeat Gosling is in this movie, just like visually.
Oh yeah.
He's balding. He's got these big ol' aviators on.
Yeah.
Almost always has a cigarette hanging from his mouth.
Yeah.
And then like he doesn't quite have like a beer belly, but it seems like he's maybe showing a little bit more weight than he is in the flashback scenes.
They do an admirable job of attempting to make Ryan Gosling look like shit.
Yeah.
It kind of doesn't work.
Yeah.
Where I'm looking at him and I'm still like, okay, that's clearly the most handsome man who's ever lived, right? But they do a pretty good job of trying to make him look like he's not Ryan Gosling.
Yeah.
By the way, my advice to Dean, my very strong advice to Dean is shave that dome, brother.
Yes.
Because I am convinced, that he'd be able to keep Michelle Williams at the end of this movie if he was just shaving that dome. That receding hairline is doing him absolutely zero favors. He would be way more convincing with the, hey baby, I love you, I can change, please stay with me, all that shit, if he was rocking just a smooth ass scalp up there instead of these like tufty little remnants of what he had going on, you know? It's sad. And he needs to just embrace it, and like it'll give him the confidence that he needs.
Yeah. The big thing for me is he works as a house painter.
Yeah.
And he always has a pair of pants on that are stained with paint, like his painting pants. He's always wearing those, and his hands are always covered in paint.
Yep.
Like,
yeah, he just looks grimy.
Dude just does not know how to clean up.
Right.
Cindy is working as a nurse. And they go off, they drop the daughter off at school. Dean goes to work for the day. Cindy goes to work for the day. Great scene of Dean driving around, smoking a cigarette, drinking a road soda.
Yeah.
It's real brief.
He is drinking at the wheel. This is something that is, I think, again, one of the strengths of this movie, I think, like, is the realism and the subtlety. I like that his very intense problem with alcohol. He is clearly like a self-destructive alcoholic.
Yeah.
Right? I like that they don't spend much time talking about it. The movie just kind of shows it to you and lets you notice, right? Like this very brief scene of him just drinking at the wheel where it's kind of like blink and you miss it. But if you're paying attention, you're like, oh, this guy needs help, right? He is not doing okay. And there's a few lines that reference it, but I think in a clunkier script, they would have like had a whole fight about it, and they never do. So I think to your point about kind of the quiet moments, being the most devastating, I do think just anytime he's got a drink in his hand, right, you're just like, oh fuck, and this is really not helping.
No,
right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I mean, we're gonna spend this whole episode talking about how fucking great these actors are.
Yeah.
He plays the alcoholic aspects of Dean's personality so well. Yeah. Like it is textbook, alcoholic, functioning alcoholic, trying to justify their habits and their addictions.
Right.
And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to watch. So while Cindy is out driving around after work, she finds their dog dead on the side of the road.
Saddest part of the movie. This is the saddest thing that happens in this movie. You looked at me like I was crazy. I'm 100% dead serious. I'm way more upset by this dead dog than I am about anything else in this movie.
It's a tone setter for sure.
Yeah, as the loving parent of two dogs, right? It just like nothing hits me in a movie like this. It's you can show me the most horrible shit happening emotionally, physically, whatever, to characters that you have endeared to me, and it will not hit me as hard as literally any dog coming to harm.
So Frankie, their daughter, has a choir recital that Dean is at, and then Cindy shows up late to it. She goes to sit down next to him.
Which, by the way, there's the choir recital. It's a bunch of fucking very small children singing Yankee Doodle, and talk about shit that I do not want to be doing. Like,
Yeah.
I would rather do almost literally anything else. I would probably rather, spend 20 minutes inserting thumbtacks into my own arm than I would listening to a bunch of fucking 5-year-olds sing Yankee Doodle at the top of their lungs, out of tune and badly. Like, there's a reason that the Podmaster and I are not parents, and it is shit like this. Because I have to, not only do I have to go to this and subject myself to it, I then also have to pretend I liked it. It's unfathomable to me. Parents are, I would say, insane, but I guess a more charitable thing to say about parenting is that it is very brave and selfless. And at this point in my life, cannot imagine myself willingly subjecting myself to this shit.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, buddy. Right there with you.
It seems like hell. Anyway.
Well, and this seems like a thing that in another movie would be a moment where Dean doesn't show up because he's the deadbeat father, and it becomes this big moment. But it's like, he's there. He's present for his kid.
Yeah.
And then...
And part of why he's present for his kid is because, again, he has to be.
Yeah.
Because he's weaponizing it against Cindy. He's always there for the kid because that's the thing that he can lord over her and be like, look how good I am with the kid, right? It's the only fucking weapon that he has in his tool belt, right? It's the only thing that he can use, because otherwise this guy's a huge fucking sack of shit, right? And he doesn't have a leg to stand on except that he's good with the kid and that she likes him. So of course he's at the recital. It's going to be his top priority because it's the only way he fucking gets anything that he wants.
Yeah, he has no ambition. He has nothing else that he says later in this movie. There's nothing else that I want to do other than, be a dad.
Yeah.
And
be a husband and be a dad.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And like I get that, and there is part of it that comes from a genuine place and comes from a place of love. But it is also, something that he can lord over her with and hang over her head.
Yeah. I kind of think he doesn't make any decision in this movie that isn't selfish, including like going to the recital. I think everything he does is selfish in this movie. And all of it just comes back to winning. He wants to win so bad in their relationship that he's like, well, this is how I win, is by being the parent that she likes better,
So Cindy tells him, like, under her breath while the choir recital's going on, that she found the dog. And I love Ryan Gosling's reaction here, because again, it just tells you so much about his character. Is he just goes immediately goes, how many times did I tell you to lock the fucking gate?
And when that happened, I gasped out loud watching this movie, and I was like, how fucking dare you? This made me so mad at him. I was furious that this was his reaction, because I was like, you don't think she's sad about the fucking dog? Like, it's just such a selfish reaction. It made me so angry.
Yeah, the thing is, I don't like Dean either, right?
Yeah.
But again, the magic of this movie for me is there are so many things that they do here that are completely understandable and justified, and I see it within myself. If something happened to one of my cats and it was someone else's fault, someone who I did care about and did love and did respect, I would probably be angry too. And I might react with anger that first time and blame them. But at the same time, like, there's just this movie thrives in the nuance for me. Thrives in the nuance and the subtlety of everything. And that's what makes it so interesting to watch, is because two different people watching it come out with two different opinions on, whose fault it is, or what their relationship is like, or every action that they do, how they justify the actions that the characters take. It's so good, and it's so. Sorry, I'm already losing my mind about this movie. I think this movie is fucking great. The fact that it's able to construct so many powerful moments out of the mundane aspects of a relationship,
Right.
is really makes this really special to me.
Yeah, and to revisit my knee-jerk kind of just anger at him from that reaction, right? I will say the Podmaster then, because she was watching the first part of this movie with me, I was basically like, I really don't like that he said that. Like, that makes me kind of hate this character that I barely know, right? She kind of took a more measured approach to it, similar to what you were just describing, where she was like, well, it's a very emotional moment and like people react to things differently, is something that she said, right? And I was like, okay, like maybe I'm not being charitable enough.
Well, and here's the thing though. I had that knee-jerk reaction too.
Right.
I recognize that immediately. I was like, oh man, what a fucking dick.
Yeah.
But you do back up from it a little bit and try to justify it in your own head, and you reach different conclusions each time. And I think there is a moment later where they are crying, and they are trying to kind of make up and reconcile about this little moment here with the dog dying.
But then immediately after that, Dean is sitting on the couch, drinking, watching like home footage of them and the dog, right? Or maybe not immediately after this.
It's shortly after this.
Yeah, and Michelle Williams is like cleaning up the house while he is allowed to take time to be sad about this.
Yeah.
And again, it's like she's just not being afforded any room in this relationship to feel stuff because he is not being responsible for any of the upkeep of the home, the parenting, right? He's the guy who is like feeling stuff all the time. He wants to play with the kid and have fun with the kid. He wants to be sad about the dog, right? And it's like, there's fucking toys on the floor that need to be cleaned up, right? And somebody's got to do that shit, right? And so the division of labor in their relationship is not fair. It's an uneven situation here, which is being shown to us very clearly because like Michelle Williams is like in the foreground cleaning shit up while he's like sitting on the couch.
After the choir recital, they drop their daughter Frankie off at Cindy's parents' house for the weekend. Dean makes up some story about Megan moved to Hollywood to become a movie dog. Another great moment that completely introduces you to Dean and his relationship with Cindy as well as Cindy's parents is Cindy's dad has an oxygen tank.
Yep.
And Dean isn't going to doesn't go up to greet him on the porch. And Cindy says, "You coming up?" And Dean has a cigarette in his hand. He goes, "I can't smoke because of the fucking oxygen tank."
Yeah.
And I think he just kind of waves at Cindy's dad from the street. And it's like, man, what a fucking dick.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
That's the selfishness that I was talking about, right? It's like, it's all about me and how I am, coping with what I'm going through. And like, he doesn't make concessions for anybody else, anybody else's circumstances or anybody else's feelings.
Yeah. And it's a great way to just introduce his relationship to the in-laws as well, which they don't dwell on it too much, but you get so much from the few scenes that they do have together.
Yeah.
So we have our first flashback of the movie here. This movie goes back and forth between the this weekend late in their relationship and the earlier scenes of their relationship as they're getting to know each other. And these earlier scenes, they montage through them pretty quickly. There's a lot of really like bright, sunny, happy music from Grizzly Bear.
Which, by the way, we should maybe, since you mentioned Grizzly Bear, we should maybe just take a second and talk about the score in this movie. Other than the performances, easily the strongest part of the movie for me is this Grizzly Bear score. I think this score is so good. Also, Grizzly Bear just as an artist who I enjoy and listen to, separate from movie soundtrack stuff, right? Really, really excellent score. Really sets the tone. Really plays into kind of the kind of sadness and longing that is being portrayed in the movie. Just a good way to kind of insert some additional emotional context is having this Grizzly Bear score play in this whole time.
Yeah, I think it's really good too. I think a lot of the songs are instrumental versions of songs that they had previously released, so I don't think there's a ton of stuff that they wrote specifically for the movie. But Ryan Gosling has some music on the soundtrack as well, and performs a song in the movie too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. I think it also immediately lets you know that you're in a flashback scene,
Right.
because as soon as you cut, that music starts, and it gives you the tone and the feeling of these flashback sequences.
The other big indicator is Ryan Gosling's hairline.
Yes. Yes.
It's always very clear which timeline we're in, because in the earlier scenes, he has Ryan Gosling's hair, and in the later scenes, he has the hair of, a 45-year-old alcoholic at the bowling alley.
And also Ryan Gosling's cool jacket in this movie.
Yeah, it's a good jacket.
One of many films, including such motion pictures as Drive, or The Nice Guys, or Blade Runner 2049, where Ryan Gosling has a cool jacket, and this one is pretty sick.
Also, he has a cool jacket at one point in Barbie.
Yeah,
he's got the fur coat thing.
Yeah, I would count that, and I would count the I Am Kenough sweatshirt as a jacket.
Yep. Ryan Gosling is apparently just an actor that wardrobe people are like, let's put a cool jacket on that guy.
And he wears them well.
He also begs for cool sunglasses.
Yeah.
His face just seems to beg for sunglasses because, again, in a lot of movies, he's also wearing dope shades.
There's a movie coming out called The Fall Guy that he's in, where he plays like a stuntman. I think he has a cool jacket in that too.
Yeah.
The man just rocks a jacket. So he is younger. He's getting a job as a mover in Brooklyn. And we are introduced to him as like a kind of a hopeless romantic.
Yeah. Sorry, I just rolled my eyes.
Yeah, you did. Yes.
I rolled my eyes when David said that. Yes, he is introduced as a hopeless romantic. He's also introduced as a hopeless romantic who has just extremely reductive and heteronormative ideas about what romance is.
Mm-hmm.
He has this scene with I think the guy's name is Marshall.
Yeah, one of the moving guys.
One of my favorite characters in this movie, by the way. This guy rocks.
Oh yeah, the movie they're not in the movie that much, but their performances are so good and naturalistic.
Yeah. But he's talking to this guy kind of about he's sort of waxing romantic, right? And basically like he's kind of communicating his character thesis, right, to us, the audience. But again, in a very real, grounded, naturalistic way, where this seems like a real conversation these guys would be having. But the thing that got an eye roll from me while I was watching it, and also just now, is he's being very reductive and heteronormative about this, where he basically is like, yeah, like I really want to find someone, but then he's like, and in relationships, women be like and men be like, right? He's basically like, women marry for security, like financial security, right? He's basically like, women choose a partner who has a good job and like has a lot of money, and men marry for love, is kind of what he's saying. And immediately I'm like, I understand why your relationship is failing in the future, dude, because that's incorrect. You are patently wrong about how you're approaching this. His mindset early on, I'm like, I get that this guy is like out looking for love. I don't think he knows what love is, And that is tragic in its own way, right? It's sad in its own way, because I'm like, he doesn't understand himself or other people well enough to have a mature relationship, right? And that's why everything goes to shit. But it's like, and so I think that the movie is maybe like trying to tell us that a little bit. I feel like maybe I felt stronger about what he was saying than the movie was telling me I should have. And so I think I was more anti-Dean at this point in the movie than I was supposed to be. Because I was basically like, shut the fuck up, man. Like, read a book. And that's coming from me, a person who notoriously does not read books.
Well, Dean's... We're going to be talking about Dean a lot. We're going to be talking about Dean so much.
Yeah.
Dean's personality traits as in these flashback scenes do carry over to the scenes in present day. And it's so interesting to see how things that he does when he's younger are trying to come across, and the movie kind of wants us a little bit to recognize them as like cute or romantic or thoughtful, and the way that those things then become selfish and become annoying later in their relationship, and his tendency towards big romantic gestures in the early parts of the relationship later in the movie manifest in them like spending a weekend at a shitty motel.
You say shitty. We'll talk about the motel.
Trying to like rekindle their lost love, and it becomes like he does bits so many times in this movie.
Yes,
he loves a bit. He loves trying to.
We will also talk about that more when we get to the hotel.
Yeah, he loves trying to like poke and prod and push Michelle Williams' buttons.
Yes,
and in the early scenes, it's like, oh, it's cute. And then later it's like, no, this guy's fucking annoying and he needs to stop.
And he knows he's annoying and he is weaponizing it against her.
Yeah.
Again, which we'll talk about when we get to the hotel. I have thoughts about that.
Yeah. There's another line that he says here in this conversation with Marshall where he says something like, women spend all their life looking for Prince Charming and then they marry the guy who's going to stick around. And what's so interesting about that is he portrays himself as Prince Charming in the flashback scenes. And then becomes the guy who's just gonna stick around.
Yep. Yeah. And I would argue he didn't know it, but he was always that guy.
Yeah.
Right? And he doesn't self-reflect enough to ever recognize that. Right? In the future scenes, he kind of still thinks that he's Prince Charming. And it's like, no, dude, you've always just been the guy that sticks around. Like, that's how you got into this relationship in the first place. Anyway.
There's a scene here where they're moving an older guy from an older gentleman from his Pennsylvania house into a retirement home. So they're having to like consolidate all of his things. So they get to the retirement home and Dean just starts unpacking all of his stuff and setting up his room and, putting out his like his wedding pictures and paintings that he has.
Yeah,
and
hangs up his uniform from his military service and stuff.
Yeah.
I will say this is a moment because I have been ragging on Dean a lot, and I will continue to do so. I will continue to say very unkind things about this character who this may come as a shock to you at this point in the episode, but I did not like. I will say this thing with him and the old guy did gain him some goodwill for a time for me, where I was like, okay, this is very sweet and nice. He is being very sweet and nice with this old man for no reason other than it will make this old man feel better and more at home, right? And I was like, okay, great job, Dean. You did one good selfless thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this shows you that Dean does have a good heart underneath everything else.
He at least is capable of acting with good intentions.
Yeah. And he the older guy, his name's Walter, is like really appreciative and says thank you and starts crying. And then we get the most devastating moment of editing that I've maybe ever seen in a movie. I was trying to think of it, and I'm like, the only other thing I can think of is like the end of The Godfather when Michael Corleone de-renounced Satan, cut to people being massacred across the city. So Ryan Gosling collects his, the other moving guys leave his money in the room. He picks up the money and steps out of Walter's retirement home room and looks into the hallway And then we cut back to present day, and we see depressed Michelle Williams looking out the window of her house as Dean is burying the dog in the backyard. And fuck. Because you know that in that flashback scene before we cut, he's looking at her across the hall. And that moment of editing is so subtle.
Yeah.
Like everything else in this movie, and so brilliant. And that's what makes it hit so hard. Every time we cut back to present day is handled so well without like drawing attention to itself. But this is maybe like my favorite moment of editing in this whole movie.
Yeah. And just like kind of overall, the editing, the filmmaking of this movie, the editing, the cinematography, color in this movie
oh my God.
is incredible.
This
right?
movie's fucking gorgeous.
Yeah, it's really beautiful to look at. All of like the technical filmmaking stuff in this movie is again like pretty unimpeachable. Like it is very well made. And I thank you for calling out that bit of editing because I didn't put it down in my notes, but I did notice it as it's like, you know, just in its technical and narrative and emotional brilliance is, you know, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had to pause the movie and then I stand up and walk around my apartment for a couple minutes.
Yeah.
To just process everything that happened.
Right.
Yeah. So this is when Dean digs the grave for their dog, is like crying and watching the home movies.
Yeah. And this is the bit where I talked about earlier where Michelle Williams is like picking up the toys while he is allowed to be sad.
Yeah.
Right. And she is not given the space to be sad.
So what he decides to do is he has this gift certificate to a motel. So he calls them to make a reservation. And they all have like different themed rooms.
Yes.
And there's this moment that is so... I just want to reach through the screen and punch this guy in the fucking face.
Yeah.
Where he's like, they have Cupid's Cove and they have the future room available. Which one do you want? And the whole time, Michelle Williams is like, I'm on call at the doctor's office tomorrow. I can't run away to some cheap sex motel. And, you know, and he keeps hammering it home. Like,
right. He's
Cupid's
like,
Cove or the future room.
Right. And he's like, we really need this. Like, and
Yeah.
it's like, do we really need this? Because he really needs this.
And
right?
yeah, he says like, let's please just get out of here, go get drunk and make love.
Yeah.
And it ain't gonna fix it, buddy.
No.
It's not gonna fix things.
Anytime you're at this point where you're like, hey, like, let's go to a motel that I have a gift certificate for. So that we can spend time with each other to fix our relationship. It's like, maybe what you should do instead of doing that is fucking talk to each other. Which, again, like you were saying, this is a moment where you want to reach through the screen and punch him in the face. Me fucking too, because it's like she is saying things to him like, no, don't do this. I don't want to do this, right? And if it's this important for him to like have time with her, guess what, buddy? She's right fucking there. Hang up that phone and have a conversation.
Yeah.
It's so infuriating.
Yeah, you know what's really gonna like add a spark to your marriage and rekindle things? Spending the weekend in a windowless motel room
With a spinning bed.
downing whiskey and having pathetic attempts to try to have sex with each other.
Yeah, I
rekindle
will say,
things.
anytime that you are feeling like your romantic partner is maybe not on the same wavelength as you, maybe there's a little bit of tension in your relationship, the thing that you should never do is throw alcohol at it, which I think this movie demonstrates very well, right? It's like, yeah, anytime you're feeling like, hey, maybe things aren't 100% okay between us right now, the answer is never let's get drunk, right? Because that's not going to help. That has never helped in the history of humanity, in the history of alcohol. Yeah.
Cindy finally just gives up and she doesn't give up so much as
is annoyed into silence.
Yeah. Dean decides to make the reservation for the future room, and we'll talk about the future room.
We will talk about the future room.
So they go liquor shopping.
Yeah.
Cindy goes liquor shopping while Dean stays in the parking lot and fills up the car with gas. And we got to talk about Bobby Ontario.
Bobby Ontario, who I presume just due to his last name is
Canadian.
is of the family that are the kings, the lords of the province of Ontario.
Fuck Bobby Ontario. All my homies hate Bobby Ontario.
Yes, probably the only man in this movie more worthy of hatred from the audience than Dean himself.
No, I also think the Cindy's boss. The
that guy
doctor
sucks.
sucks too.
You're right, that guy sucks. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, other than maybe Walter, who is very old and probably racist,
And Marshall.
and Marshall, right?
Marshall's
Marshall gets
cool.
and the cab driver. So other than those guys, every man in this movie sucks shit.
Yeah, Bobby Ontario is just runs into Cindy liquor shopping, and they're old friends, an old flame.
Yeah, we don't really know what their relationship isn't defined when they run into each other. It's kind of just like, oh, hey, it's been a really long time.
Yeah.
Right.
So they're talking, shooting the shit. She says she's married, and then Bobby says, "Wow, you're married. Have you been faithful to him?"
Yeah.
What a fucking shithead.
Yes. So
what an asshole
Yes.
this guy is.
Insane over the line question to ask. And when you learn more about the history that these two characters have with each other, like, you see where that question is coming from, but it makes it even more shitty, kind of, right? It's like he's even more of an asshole for asking once you know the backstory.
Dean needs therapy.
Yeah.
Bobby needs to be killed.
Yes. I will say, when this happened, the Podmaster and I were watching this scene together, and when he asked her if she had been faithful in her marriage, the Podmaster said, if a woman asked me, right? She was like, if a woman asked you if you had been faithful to me, I would, and this is a direct quote, cut her in the lower abdomen to sever her ovaries. And then she also said she would mutilate her vagina so she would never have good sex ever again as long as she lived. So that was the reaction this elicited from the Podmaster. She was basically like, I will cut that bitch.
Podmaster, if you're listening, you're the best.
Yeah.
I love that. That's so good. That's so good. Yeah, this fucking shitbag. I fucking hate him so much.
Yeah, Bobby Ontario, yes, should be stoned publicly.
So she takes off with Dean. They're driving to the motel, and she brings up like, "Oh, guess who I ran into at the grocery store buying liquor?" And Dean does not take this well.
Mm-mm. And so he is immediately kind of on guard about this whole thing, and she immediately lies to him and says that Bobby Ontario looked like gross and fat and bald, right? And that's not true. He, as much as we hate Bobby Ontario, guy's looking good. He's very fit. He's very handsome, right? And this is a moment where I'm starting to get mad at Cindy, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, you don't need to do this. Like, you don't need to lie to him about this.
And Dean even says that. He's like, what are you saying that? Are you trying to make me feel better or something? Like,
right.
Like, why would I care what he looks like?
Yeah. And she is trying to make him feel better. But the reason that she's trying to make him feel better is not because she cares how he feels. It's because it's going to be easier if this doesn't become a whole thing, right? She just doesn't want the fight, right? And so she's trying to avoid the fight by trying to appease him by being like, yeah, he's like ugly and fat and old, right? And like, I don't think she actually gives a shit if he feels bad or not, right? I think it's more about, I can't deal with this right now, so I'm just going to lie to you to make you shut up about this.
Yeah.
Is sort of the thing, right?
And then there's a moment here where she's like, she's the one driving. So she is like, I'm going to pull over to go pee. And she literally just runs into the woods and stands behind a tree to just get away from him for a moment.
Yeah.
It's such a small moment, but again, it's like they're driving through rural Pennsylvania trying to get somewhere, and the only thing she can do is pull off the side of the road to just go run into the woods for a few minutes to chill out.
Right.
It hit me a lot more on this watch than it did the first time, so that's why I wanted to call it out.
Yeah, I will say this is one of the moments of the kind of quiet devastation that you were talking about that worked for me the best, is her just like being like, I just need to step away from this situation and like breathe. Right? Yeah.
This transitions to another flashback sequence where we see Cindy is in med school and she's dating Bobby, and Cindy's rolling around in a wheelchair for some reason.
She's doing a bit, which I guess in 2010 might, or I guess because this is 2010, but also it's 6 years in the past, so like 2004 or whatever, right? I guess at the time this bit would not seem extremely ableist and problematic to just be an be an able-bodied person and just decide to use a wheelchair as a little gag, right? And I was like, this hasn't aged particularly well.
She goes to meet Bobby at wrestling practice, and Bobby wants her to come over later, and just there's very like sloppy, gross, horny college student kissing.
Yeah.
And he's like, come over. And I'm like, fucking, I want to shoot you in the head, dude. Calm the fuck down.
Yeah.
And she's not really she's busy, or she's not really interested in coming over, but he's being very forceful.
He's being
about
pushy.
it. He's being pushy.
Yeah. A real pushy sex pest of a man.
There's a nice scene here where she's at her parents' house with her grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
And she's asking her grandmother what it was like when she fell in love. And her grandma says, I don't think I found it. And she's like, not even with Grandpa? And it's like, Grandpa never really like learned to respect me for who I was, or never treated me as my own individual person or something like that. And this is where Cindy gets her perception of love.
Yeah.
In the same way that like Dean has his big romantic lofty fantasies about it that he gets from talking to the mover, his coworkers. This is Cindy's family. Her parents have a very strained relationship. Her dad is just like outwardly combative and abusive.
Yes, in a way that is so over the top that I don't want to say I found it funny, but his outburst where he's like, "You expect me to eat this fucking shit?"
Yeah,
I was sort of like, it's not funny, but because there are men like this who exist and are head of household in families, and that as a reality is fucking terrifying. I did sort of like this actor just fucking flipping his lid and being like, fucking, you eat this garbage.
This movie is not just doom and gloom.
Yeah.
There are some funny moments, and yeah, I did get a little bit of a chuckle about this guy just losing his shit.
Right. It like, in textually in the movie, you're understanding she's sort of from a broken home. Not a broken home in that her parents are divorced, but in that they are on, like you said, very strained, right?
Yeah.
And that's all very bad and makes you sympathetic towards Cindy's character and her circumstances. At the same time, just seeing a guy be a huge red-faced hollering asshole at his family at the dinner table is a thing that when it happens in a movie, I'm always kind of like, this is kind of entertaining to watch. I kind of like to see a guy yelling at his family when it's fake.
Yeah. That's we're going to bring him up again. A patron saint of this podcast, Tom Atkins.
Oh, man.
That's his whole character in Creepshow, is he's just an angry,
yeah,
abusive, alcoholic dad. And he's in the wraparound segment, so he doesn't have like a full segment. He's just at the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
And he's just yelling at his kid and his wife about dinner the whole time, and it's great.
It rules.
We are a fan of those characters in fiction.
Yes. Guys like that in real life, again, should be stoned publicly.
Speaking of, Bobby Ontario has just the most unpleasant looking doggy style sex with Cindy at his apartment or whatever.
Yeah.
And then he non-consensually ejaculates inside of her.
Yes.
And she is understandably very pissed about
She's pissed
this.
off, yeah,
And
because
then
that's not a thing that is cool to do.
yeah, and he writes it off. It's just like, oh, I'm sorry. And then she goes into the bathroom to clean herself up.
Yeah. Which, by the way, fucking wrap it up, guys.
Yeah, man.
Like, and Bobby Ontario is clearly one of those dudes who's like, oh, it feels so much better without it. Like, I'll pull out, you know? And it's like, I just wish I wish that she had the confidence. I wish that she was able to assert herself a little bit better. I feel very sympathetic and bad for this character that she doesn't feel comfortable doing that, because what she should do is lay down the hammer and be like, no, wrap it up where it's not happening at all, fucker. But that's very much not her vibe, unfortunately.
Yeah. This eventually leads to her getting pregnant, but we're not there yet. But
Yeah.
this is what leads to her having Frankie. But yeah, fucking, I know we're ragging on Dean. I just really want to emphasize that, like, give me a sequel to this movie that's 2 hours of Bobby Ontario in a saw trap and tortured.
Just getting his nuts whipped like in Casino Royale.
Yeah, I want a snuff film of Bobby Ontario getting his bamboo sticks shoved under his fingernails.
I do agree with you that regardless of any things that I may have said and may say in the future of this episode about how bad Dean is, just remember, listeners, I do hate Bobby Ontario much more.
Yeah, we're not going to do a full disgusting shit people watch for him, because I think he doesn't quite fit all the criteria.
He's too well groomed.
Yeah, but maybe an honorary disgusting shit people, or he's a different tier on that list somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, fuck him. I hope he dies. There's another scene later where Cindy is taking her grandmother back to her grandmother's retirement home, and it's the same one that Dean is at during his scenes. Where she's reading romance novels to her grandmother in her bed. And her grandma goes, "I want a cigarette."
Yeah.
And she's like, "No, you can't. You're in bed now." And then she goes, "I need a cigarette."
Yes. And she does.
That made me laugh.
Yes, it made me laugh as well. And also just the way she says it. There is like, it's one of those lines where they don't deliver any profanity in the line, but there's like profanity implied.
Yeah, there's an implied fuck in
by
there.
the delivery when she's like, "I need a cigarette." It sounds like all she says is, "I need a cigarette." It sounds like, "Give me a cigarette, you fucking bitch." Like, that is very much the tone of it. And I like that Cindy's reaction to this is kind of like, she kind of is amused by it, right? And she does give her a cigarette. She's like, "Open the window, shut the door," type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So yesterday we talked about My Bloody Valentine. That movie makes me want a beer. This movie makes me want a cigarette.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, like, anytime there's a movie where people are smoking just a shit ton throughout the runtime, it's always like, hey, that looks real cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosling's smoking a ton in this movie. And he looks so good.
Yeah. He looks cool as shit, especially in the early scenes, but even later, like, even kind of shitty looking Gosling, I'm like, this guy kind of still looks awesome.
Yeah. So then this sequence ends with they see each other across the hallway, because her grandma's in the room across the hall from Walter's room, and she like closes the door on him, and he knocks on the door, and he's like, "You saw me take that money, didn't you?" "Well, I didn't steal it. And I know that look. I've stolen before, and I know that look. I didn't steal it. I earned this." And he immediately is just laying it on really thick. He's like, "I make money that I can take girls out on dates with."
Yeah. And she looks like she's, like, sort of charmed by this, but also kind of like, "Stop talking to me, you random guy." Right?
She's smiling to herself, but she's also trying to close the door on his face.
Right. Because, like, he looks like Ryan Gosling, but also he's being a little pushy and annoying, right?
Uh-huh.
And she does repeatedly say, "Go away," and he doesn't, which I think this is a microcosm of just what is wrong with their relationship for the rest of it, right? Is that she basically is like, "Hey, I am slightly charmed by you. You are very handsome," right? "There is some kind of innate attraction here, but also I would like it if you fucking cooled it and left me alone." And he refuses to.
Yeah. there's no sense of boundary.
No.
She says like, here's the boundary. And he's like, okay, I'm going to take that as a challenge and I'm going to try to wear you down.
Yeah. Yes. And the problem is when a guy takes that approach and they look like Ryan Gosling, a lot of the time it works, right? Because it's like, he is very handsome and very just naturally charming. I think he's great casting for this role, right? Because you understand why she eventually gives in and is like, sure, okay, right? I drew the line. You kept pushing it. I will allow you to step further over it because you're fucking handsome as shit and you're very suave and very charming. And the problem is she never actually gives him permission, right? He just like inserts himself, you know? And it's like I don't think it goes fully to the extent of where I would be like, this is like stalking or like being like predatory necessarily, but it like borders on that, and it makes me uncomfortable with him in general, right? Because I'm like, he has no respect for her or for like boundaries. Yeah.
Well, Dean's whole thing is he has these lofty romantic ideals.
Yeah.
But he consistently tries to force things.
Yeah.
He's like this whole weekend that they're doing, which we're gonna cut back to in a minute. This whole weekend excursion is just him trying to force them to fix their relationship in a way that's easy, that doesn't take any work.
Right. And then he gets mad at her for not playing along.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, no, dude, you have to understand her thoughts and feelings. Right. And I'm not going to say that Cindy's totally blameless either, because I think her biggest downfall and kind of her contribution to the breakdown of this relationship is that she refuses to communicate her thoughts and feelings to him. Right. She's so closed up and bottled in. And I don't think that's necessarily like her fault, because we see a lot of like her home life probably contributes to her being that way, right? But it's like, again, these are people who don't know how to communicate with each other.
Yeah, that's the bottom line. And there are moments where she does try to communicate, and again, Dean just takes that as a challenge to try to force things his way.
Yes. And he always just makes it about himself. Right?
Yeah.
He's not interested in actually hearing her thoughts and feelings. He wants to shape her thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah.
So this scene ends with him giving her his business card because he doesn't have a phone, and he writes his name on the back. She doesn't give him her name, which is funny.
Yeah.
The door closes, and then we have another edit to them opening the door in the present to the future room. And the note that I have written down here is, wah 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 wah, king in the castle, king in the castle.
I have a chair. I have a spinning bed. The future, David, let's talk about the future room as a location. A decent chunk of this movie takes place in the future room.
Yes.
First of all, we were talking about the lighting. The lighting in the future room is fucking fantastic. It's one of the things visually that I like the most about this movie. This set is great. It's a windowless like motel room, right? That is fully decorated like it's the inside of a spaceship. There's like metal paneling on all the walls, and there's like little fucking analog blinking lights and instruments and shit. Yeah.
As Dean says when he walks in, he doesn't actually say wah 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 because he's not Borat. When he walks in, he says we're inside a robot's vagina.
Yeah.
It's it's like really tacky 50s or 60s style futurism.
Yes, and the bed spins around.
So the spinning bed, which Ryan Gosling is very amused by, to his credit,
yeah,
I would probably be kind of I would enjoy that for about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
It's a fun little novelty. Also, there are no windows in this hotel room.
There's no windows.
Which is a thing Michelle Williams calls out, and I was like, I would have a big problem with that.
Yeah.
I'm with her on this. But I love this set. I love this location. Just visually and for the role that it plays in the movie, right? Because it's so kitschy and so ridiculous and so try hard and pathetic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it feels kind of like an externalization of Ryan Gosling's character in a way. In that it is very immature, very try hard, and ultimately very pathetic and sad, right? It feels very much like they were like, yeah, let's just make Dean the room that they're in, right? And the lighting is very blue, which also, it feeds both into the title of the film and also just the emotions of kind of sadness and desperation that we're feeling very intensely in this location.
And they shoot it so well in terms of like, it feels so small and claustrophobic and uncomfortable. And to me, at least, despite all the blue kind of cool colors in the scene, I feel hot watching it. I feel like hot and sweaty and swampy and grimy in this hotel room.
Yeah.
It just seems like an awful place to spend a weekend.
Yes. And you already alluded to it when they first walk in there. Ryan Gosling is cracking a bunch of kind of immature jokes and, spinning around on the bed and fucking acting like a child.
Mm-hmm.
He is being so annoying. And this is where I was like, this is where I had the realization, he's intentionally weaponizing how annoying he is to try and get a reaction out of her, right? I think that this is on purpose. I don't necessarily think it's motivated by being malicious, because I think he does genuinely want to connect with her, right? But I think he is intentionally being more annoying than his natural inclination is to be, maybe, right? Because he knows that that's a way that he can get a response from her, right? And he wants to engage with her. He's just doing it in an unhealthy way, which is like, I'll annoy you into talking to me,
Mm-hmm. And there's another moment of immaturity here that I related to, where Cindy goes to take a shower, and Dean is just like watching her as she showers. And he's like, "You look so good naked." Mm. And he takes that as a cue to strip naked, get into the shower. He tries to eat her out. She's not interested.
Yes, he attempts to initiate shower sex, which, just by the way, we'll get to your actual analysis and like finer point on this scene in a second. But I just want to take a brief sidebar and say shower sex fucking sucks shit.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
It's the worst type of sex to have. And anyone who intentionally like opts for it is either forced to by circumstances or is some kind of fucking sicko. Because it's not like 10 times out of 10.
Yeah.
Having sex in any dry location, a bed, a couch, the floor, is better and more gratifying than shower sex. It's slippery. The water somehow, rather than lubricating, just dries everything out, right? And then when you're under the water, right, you're like getting it in your eyes and shit. And then when you're out of the water, you're fucking freezing. It's so bad. It sucks. 0 out of 10.
Yeah. I've had some intimate moments with partners in the shower. And yeah, not a great experience.
No, it's bad.
The only people who think it's cool are people who are 14-year-old boys who haven't had it yet.
Right.
But the thing about this scene that I connected with is something that I had to learn about myself in the relationships that I've been with, is when you get comfortable with someone, there are times when you are just both naked.
Yeah.
And learning that there are moments when you are naked and it's okay to initiate sexy times. And there are times where you're just both naked and you need to respect that other person's boundaries and their personal space.
Yeah.
And Dean totally doesn't get it in this scene. And I'm bringing this up because I saw him do this and I was like, oh, this is a thing. This is a situation that I've been in and something that I've had to learn from and grow from with my partners.
Right.
And I'm bringing this up because you're being so honest and about your relationship with the Podmaster, and I really appreciate you bringing that to the show. So I just felt like I needed to bring something here where you just
yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. Like the thing is that you have to learn, and that I think society doesn't teach, especially men, right?
Yeah.
Is that when you are in a long-term romantic relationship, or even like or any romantic relationship, an established romantic relationship where you are committed to a person, right? that in and of itself does not constitute blanket consent, right?
Exactly.
It's like you still have to navigate that stuff moment by moment, day by day, feeling by feeling, right? And at any time, if your partner is like, not right now, I'm not in the mood, I'm not interested, or they don't even need to give you a reason.
Exactly.
Right?
They don't even necessarily need to communicate it.
Right. And if it is clear that it is not the moment, right? Like you have to respect that. And I feel like a lot of the time, like media, movies and TV and stuff that's geared at men, especially like action genre stuff, teaches us sort of the opposite, which is basically like, yeah, once you have like a woman who is interested in you, like you're good to go, like green light, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no, like people are like nuanced, and it sometimes isn't even, it often isn't even about you, right? It's like, it's whatever that person's going through. They fucking ate a big meal and they feel bloated, right? And it's like, you have to like know your partner well enough to like, you know, follow those cues. And yeah, I think the thing that you were saying about this scene, right, is that it's like clear that Dean doesn't, you know, which is again like a thing that is frustrating about him. Is it's like you should know her better by now, you know.
Mm-hmm. After she gets out of the shower, he puts on a CD, and they lights up a cigarette. They get drinks, and it's a song that's important to them. It's their song. It comes back later during the flashback sequences, and they sort of start dancing together. And it's like one of the few moments in this movie where you think that you see them capture that spark that they had at their beginning of the relationship again. At this point, I am in so much emotional and physical pain.
Yeah. I can't say that I necessarily relate, but this scene did work for me as like like maybe there is something here, if not worth saving, at least like worth mourning the loss of, right? Because she does sort of soften up to him a little bit here, and you kind of get the movie is telling you very overtly, right, that you should feel this way, but I think it like is pretty effective in this scene where it's like, oh yeah, like there is something that drew these people together to begin with, right? Mm-hmm. And you're kind of seeing them recapture that very briefly, and it like the fleeting nature of it is like the affecting thing. I can't say that I was as emotionally moved as you were, but yeah.
I like a good dancing scene in a movie. And it's not like they're dancing, but you know, they're vibing and they're starting to sort of slow dance together. I like when things slow down and we just get a moment, and the music's really good. Of course, the set looks great and the lighting's great. It's a very touching moment in a part of this movie that is normally just really sad and debilitating, and painful to watch. And even though it's really sweet and nice, it also just made me feel like shit too.
Yeah, and I think that that's the thing that this movie, again, I think that this is like, I think it's crafted very well, and I think that the thing that you're kind of reacting to, right, is a thing that it's doing very well, which is it's like it can't be just sad the entire time in the future, because otherwise the sadness loses its sting, right? There have to be breaks in the sadness that allow you to feel, you know, that nothing is more devastating and depressing in a way than hope in a hopeless situation, right? Yeah. And so that glimmer of hope is the thing that like makes you feel the sadness more profoundly, right? Because the breaks from the sadness are what allows you to recontextualize the sadness again when it comes back.
We have another flashback sequence here of Cindy with her grandmother at her parents' house, and Bobby Ontario shows up with flowers trying to make up, and it's very awkward. It's not going well, and Cindy doesn't want to talk to him, so she just goes inside.
Yeah.
And another great line from a human garbage can, Bobby Ontario. I'm trying to say sorry, and you're acting like a total bitch.
What a fucking asshole. Yeah, and the problem with Bobby Ontario, and I think why you and I are reacting so strongly to him, is like this is such a recognizable type of guy.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
He's written and played in a way where he's not like a cartoonish, over-the-top stereotype of a shitty boyfriend. It's like, no, yeah, like we've all known that guy, you know? What a fucking piece of shit. Anyway.
And to an extent, I have been that guy.
Right. And I think that's the thing that I reacted to a lot in Bobby Ontario and in Dean.
Yeah.
That makes me really angry with them is it's like I recognize immature, shitty behaviors that I personally have also exhibited in my life. And that makes me hate them more because it's stuff that I've had to like correct in myself, you know? But yeah.
We have another scene with Marshall here. Fucking king shit, Marshall. Dean's going on and on about love at first sight and all this shit.
Yeah.
And he's talking about Cindy, the girl at the retirement home. And Marshall's like, bro, you don't know her.
Yeah.
You just looked at her once.
Listen to Marshall, my man. He's totally right here.
Yeah.
He's 1000% correct.
Yeah.
He's basically like, you don't know her at all. And his advice to Dean, Marshall's advice to Dean is basically just like, hey, like, go out there and like meet some other people, like, get some, relationship experience, have some kind of, personal growth in how you interact with women, right? Which basically he says by saying go out there and get some pussy, but that's what he means, right? Is play the field a little bit, right? Learn some things about yourself, about how you are in relationships, rather than just like diving in head first with this girl you do not know.
Yeah, Marshall understands brevity.
Yeah.
So he
just
sums
says get
it
some
up.
pussy.
Just go get some pussy.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, Marshall's got a good head on his shoulders.
He does. Yeah.
I
bet Marshall's lady at home is very, very happy.
Oh yeah. I bet they have a perfect relationship.
Yeah.
Dean finds a locket in the moving truck that belongs to Walter, the guy that they moved into the nursing home. So he takes the bus and the train or whatever back to Pennsylvania to return it to him, but all of his stuff is gone. So presumably Walter's passed away.
Yes, which is funny that Dean apparently does not immediately put this together because he keeps asking what happened to Walter, and I'm like, it's a retirement home, and the man was ancient, and all his shit is gone. What do you think happened to him?
He goes across the hall and asks Cindy's grandmother about it, and then also asks her about Cindy. And he's like, who was that girl that was in here a little while ago, the cute blonde one? And it's like, dude, it's like, why are you asking it that way?
Yeah. And also, you gave her the card with the number and said that if she was interested, she could call and ask for you.
Yeah.
And you know what? She fucking hasn't. Ball is in her court. Leave it alone.
Yeah.
Right? And instead, he's like, hey, like, what's her name? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's very frustrating to me because I'm just like, you did your part, right? You did your part, which is like, I saw a pretty girl, I made a move, right? I gave her the opportunity to continue this interaction if she so desires. And that's all you can do. But because he's him, right? He's got to keep pushing that line, you know?
Yeah. Bro, don't worry about it. Plenty other fish in the sea.
Right.
Just,
go give some other girl your card. You look like Ryan Gosling.
Yeah. Did you see me in the Notebook? I'm Ryan Gosling. So he runs into Cindy on the bus, and he's got a fucking ukulele.
Yeah.
This fucking ukulele.
Yeah. He was strumming it a little bit when he was like doing a sad boy shit alone in his little apartment earlier in the movie too. And as soon as he busted that thing out, I was like, oh yeah, it was 2010.
It really was a time. He sees Cindy on the bus, and he has this little like smirk of like smug self-satisfaction that he's like, oh yes, it's fate.
Right.
I gotta go over and say something. And
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, don't do this.
Yes, you absolutely do not have to do that. Again, she's got the number, right? And then if she does eventually call, you can be like, oh, funny thing, I actually saw you on the bus the other day, right? Like,
Yeah.
without being creepy about it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
don't approach a woman in public like this. And he comes over and immediately starts doing bits. He's immediately like,
Yeah.
I gotta be funny and sarcastic. And she's not, she's slightly charmed, but she's also not totally buying his game.
Yes, it is the thing like it was earlier where she's kind of like, okay, this guy is sort of charming, but I also kind of want him to go away, is kind of how she's playing it.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah.
And there's another fucking cringeworthy fucking line that he gives here where he's like, the prettier a girl is, it means she's crazy, which means you must be insane.
Yeah.
Fucking Casanova over here.
Right. And again, there's like just so much like misogyny baked into that too.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, this man needs to educate himself.
Yeah. I think they talk about Walter a little bit, and she says that Walter died. And then the moment where she kind of breaks or starts warming up to him, I guess. She tells him a dirty joke about a child molester.
This moment is pretty wild.
It's also kind of a pretty funny joke.
I didn't laugh out loud at it, but it was the kind of joke where I was like, oh damn. All right.
There's a past version of me that would have told that joke, you know?
Oh, absolutely, me too. In middle school, this would have been my big, like, I would have come to school and been like, hey guys, I just learned the funniest joke. And me and all my shitty little friends would have laughed our heads off.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But I do hope that maybe, one day I'll meet a woman and I'll tell our future children that, how did you meet Mom? Well, I was sitting on the bus and she told me a joke about a child molester.
I will say it's not really on the same footing, but it's sort of in a similar morbid vein. One of the earliest conversations that the Podmaster and I had was her telling me about all of the conspiracy theories around how Courtney Love potentially murdered Kurt Cobain rather than that being a suicide. Like, that was one of our earliest extended conversation topics. So we did dive right into the morbid end as well. She wasn't making jokes about it necessarily. Not that she wouldn't necessarily, but she didn't lead with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This leads to them hanging out in the city later. And this is one of those scenes that they kind of improvised, and they just shot a bunch of footage of them walking through the city and learning things about each other. Where there's a moment where Dean's got his fucking ukulele and he's gonna sing a song, and Michelle Williams can tap dance.
Yeah.
And so when they were discussing ideas for their characters, Ryan Gosling was like, well, he can play instruments, obviously.
Yeah. Very talented musician, actually.
Yeah.
Ryan Gosling. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was like, well, I feel like he would play the ukulele. So I was like, okay, save that. And then Michelle Williams knows how to tap dance, so she saved that. So this was the first moment where they as people realized these different talents that they had. And I love this moment where Ryan Gosling says, I have to sing Goofy to sing. And he starts singing, and he just sounds like his actual singing voice in his real band,
yes,
Dead Man's Bones.
Yes.
He's just doing his Dead Man's Bones voice.
Yes, which it is sort of like the style of singing that he uses, both in that band and in this movie, is sort of like 1930s, like old-timey radio. Like he just sounds like that, which is very funny. But yeah.
But yeah, it's good. It's a really good moment. It's really sweet.
Yeah, so the next thing in this past sequence is they take a taxi, and they're like making out in the back of the cab because their like first little date, little meet cute thing has gone well, and they're into each other at this point. So they're like making out in the back of this cab, and this taxi driver is my favorite character in this movie easily. He fucking he runs away with this movie because they're like making out, and he keeps saying, do not touch the young lady in my taxi. and he's like, I don't care what you do on your own time. Like, no sex in my taxi. This is like my home. Do you understand? And it's just, I love how like stern and aggressive he's being about it. And then Michelle Williams kind of starts, this is a moment that I did think was very funny and charming from her. She does sort of start playing into it and being like, oh yeah, please keep this man away from me. He's being such like a weirdo right now, like as a joke to try and like, tease Ryan Gosling a little bit. Just very funny sequence, and I fucking love this dude.
Yeah.
He's like, I drive this cab all the fucking time. This is like my livelihood, and I am not going to be cleaning up cum from the back seat. I spent years doing that, and then I instated the rule. Never again.
These young lovers are experiencing one of the defining memories of their lives, and meanwhile, the taxi cab driver is like, fucking same shit, different day.
Yes, and you know what? He's right and they're wrong. Because I don't give a shit if you just had a romantic meet cute. I will not be renting a steam cleaner to clean up the results of it. Fuck off. Do that in your own home.
Yeah, so this flashback ends back in the present. They're having dinner in the future room. And this is a moment where we mentioned earlier where Michelle Williams asks Ryan Gosling, like, what is there anything else that you want to do? And he's like, all I want to do is be your husband and be Frankie's dad. Mm-hmm. And I never wanted that, but I'm happy doing it, and it's all that I want to do. And it's again, it's another one of those moments where you see his lack of ambition, but you also understand that, like, me personally, I kind of want that too.
Right.
And I kind of just want to be there for somebody else later in my life, you know, where I'm not that interested in a career. I do want to be able to make money and be able to support someone, but part of the way you do that is by having a job that isn't painting houses, you know?
Well, and even if it is just a job painting houses, right? What she wants from him, because she doesn't have an issue with how he makes money. She's basically like, even if it doesn't make money, she says in this scene, she's like, it doesn't have to make money. Like, what do you want to do, right? She wants, she thinks that he is unfulfilled, right? And that maybe if he had some kind of outlet that he was passionate about that wasn't just her and the kid, he would be a happier person. Yeah. And be better to be around.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I'm sorry.
No, you're this is not a right or wrong situation.
No.
We can have differing opinions. Yeah.
But to your point, there's a line here where she says, like, I'd like to see you have a job where you didn't have to drink at 8 a.m. to get through it.
Right.
And Dean's response is another just like classic functioning alcoholic thing where he's like, I have a job where I get to drink a beer at 8 a.m.
Yeah. Which was very much a moment where I was like, this guy has a problem and he's not admitting it to himself.
Yeah.
Right. It's very much like he's deflecting. He's like, it's sad, you know?
Yeah. It's sad as fuck. It's sad as shit. This chunk of the present day stuff is really tough to get through. Yeah. And there are parts later in this movie that are also tough to get through, but for me this is really, really rough.
Man, I literally just put it together. This movie is smarter than I am. That the room that they're in when at the motel is called the future room.
Yeah. And
these are the future scenes. And the other scenes are the past scenes. And also they're kind of determining the future of their relationship in the scenes that take place in this room. And that literally just sunk in for me. I was like, oh, the future room.
And it's also like you said, a representation of Dean's personality.
I guess I was more focused on that, and I wasn't thinking textually what future room.
The subtlety of this movie, Justice. It's so good. I love it.
It feels less subtle now that I voiced the observation, but the movie doesn't draw attention to it, so I think I'm fine. I think I'm not just an idiot who missed something very obvious.
Yeah. They're drinking here. They're getting drunk.
Yeah, I like that while they're at the dinner table having this conversation, both of them have 2 drinks. Mm-hmm. There are champagne glasses with champagne in them, and then there's also some kind of vodka cocktail that they have made, or whiskey or something. And I think it is also a nice little understated, subtle thing here that as they're having this conversation, which is quickly devolving into bickering, right? Both of them are taking drinks from the cocktails and leaving the champagne untouched, right? Which is, I kind of picked up a double meaning in that, right? One is that the champagne is kind of the symbol of romance, of love and romance. And, you know, if you have a romantic evening with a partner, it's stereotypical to have a glass of champagne, right? And it's like the drink of weddings and engagements,
special
right?
occasions and stuff.
Yeah. And also more alcohol in that cocktail than in that glass of champagne.
Yeah.
So I think it's both things where it's like the champagne is a symbol of romance and they're not touching that. They're going for the cocktail instead. And also they're both just trying to get drunk as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And the bickering kind of leads to Cindy starting to prod him a little bit and like asking him to fight her.
Yeah.
And they end up wrestling on the bed. Dean like falls over. They start kind of tussling with each other on the floor and starting to get
like
close and
laughing
romantic.
they're laughing and it's goofy and a little romantic, even though it's coming from kind of like a place of desperation.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And this is again one of those moments where the sadness, the bleakness, kind of breaks to give you a glimmer of hope, so that the next sadness hits harder and is more devastating.
Which is Dean saying, "Let's have another baby."
Yeah.
It drops like a bomb in this movie.
Oh man. Yeah. And this is one of those moments where I was just like, this fucking guy, drives me crazy, because this is not a decision that you can expect your partner to be down with when you make it drunk in a hotel room on the day that you buried your dog, right? Having a second kid is shit you have to have talked about before.
Yeah, it's one of those immature things that, as like a younger person in a relationship for the first time, you get those intrusive thoughts when you're in bed with your partner. It's like, I feel that rush of emotion in my chest. I should just say the thing. Don't say the thing.
Don't say the thing. And if you're thinking about saying the thing, right? Then in a moment where you are sober and not rolling around on the floor, have an adult conversation about it, right? Be like, hey, you know what I've been thinking about? This big thing that would change our lives fundamentally. Let's talk about that like two mature adults, which they should be able to do because they've been married for fucking 5 years. And they just haven't gotten there. Yeah.
And then this leads to them attempting to have sex. And this is just so uncomfortable.
Yeah,
it skeeves me the fuck out.
Viscerally uncomfortable to watch, because nothing about it is like sexual violence, but also it's just like very weird and uncomfortable intimacy, right?
Yeah.
Where like he's being kind of pushy, she's kind of initially being like no, and he's not really like forcing himself on her, but he's also not getting off, and he's like continuing to kind of like be like, let me unbutton your shirt or whatever. And then she does take her underwear off, right? And then he's like, okay, like I guess we're doing it this way, where you're like being really not into it, but then just being like, okay, go ahead, right? And it's very sad and uncomfortable and bad to watch.
Yeah, it's rough. So he initially starts trying to be more sensual and gentle and romantic and stuff like that. She does not. There's a moment where she's like clenching her fist and gritting her teeth.
Yeah.
That is so viscerally upsetting to me.
Yeah.
And she's so she's just not reciprocating it at all.
Yeah.
And then he's like what, like he's acting very offended about it, and then she takes her underwear off and they start having like rougher sex, and then his reaction is like, it's not working. And during this rougher sex, he's like, do you want me to hit you? Do you want me to rape you? I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And he keeps saying it over and over again.
Yeah.
To the point of it just being really viscerally uncomfortable.
Yeah. And it's the thing, this is like the physical manifestation of a thing that we've already talked about that is part of their dynamic, which is him pushing boundaries, even when he is receiving signals that he should back off. And also her refusing to communicate what she does and doesn't want, right? She's not saying much of anything, right? She's kind of just refusing to engage with him, right? She's not saying, like, no, get off me, or like, not right now. I'm too drunk. This isn't what I would like, or even, this isn't what I would like, but here's this alternative,
Yeah.
right? That we could do, right? Instead, she's sort of, gritting her teeth and mostly being silent, right? And he's being like pushy, right? And it's like it's the central problem with their relationship that the movie does a very good job of showing, right? Which is like he fucking is acting on his own selfish urges and not respecting boundaries, and she just doesn't talk to him,
Yeah, it's really rough. It's really difficult to sit through, honestly. And yeah, communication is important. I have this written down here at this scene, maybe more so than anywhere else in this movie.
Yeah.
Communication in a relationship and during sex, so important.
Yeah. And just in general, because marriage is, sex, communication and consent, obviously, during sex is extremely important. But in a marriage, like, the components of a marriage are, they span everything in your life, right? Like, marriage is something that affects every facet of your life. It affects your finances, your schedule, your work life, your cleaning habits, right? All of that is not untouched by not just marriage, but by cohabitation, right? A long-term relationship with another person. And it's like communication is vital to every component of your life when you're sharing it with another person, right? And it's like, you can't expect to fucking be happy if you're not talking to the person you're sharing space with, right?
Yeah.
And that applies very heavily sexually, right? But also with every other component of your life. It's like, if you want something or don't want something, your partner should know, It's,
This very, very uncomfortable sequence of failed sex cuts to the flashback of Dean and Cindy having sex. Like, it's Dean eating her out.
Yes.
And it's such a stark contrast to the last scene without again really drawing attention to itself. It's like it's clear that they enjoy each other. They're enjoying each other's bodies, and the performances are really showcasing that in a good way. It's also kind of hot. It's kind of a hot scene.
Yes, it is also a scene that gained Dean just a little bit of goodwill from me once again, because despite saying some shit that would be totally at home on men's rights activists' Reddit boards previously in this film, he does at least perform cunnilingus,
yes.
where I was like, didn't really peg him as the type of guy who would do that, and good on you, sir. And he appears to be doing a good job.
Yeah, he seems to be enjoying himself down there.
Yeah.
Tongue punching that beaver.
Yeah, I like that he's making... I like that... yes, David.
You said cunnilingus, and I'm like, we're not saying that fucking word on this show.
Yeah, but I do like that he's making sounds of pleasure while he's doing that. Yeah. That is a nice thing that they included as well, where it's like, oh, he's moaning a little bit because he's enjoying himself doing this. It's nice.
Yeah. This is also followed up with Cindy discovering that she's pregnant and the start of her, her falling out with Bobby, where Bobby finds Dean's business card that she's looking at in the library or something. And then later, Dean and Cindy are walking along, I'm assuming the Brooklyn Bridge. I don't know New York City that well.
There's a lot of bridges there, but that's as good a guess as any.
Yeah, it's one of the bridges. And she's upset and clearly not interested in sharing it. And Dean has to push it. He has to make it a bit. So he's like, I'm going to jump off this bridge, and literally gets up and climbs on the fence and climbs over the fence. Like, I'm going to jump off this bridge if you don't tell me what's going on.
Yeah.
Just to be cutesy and clever and get his way. And she relents and she says, I'm pregnant.
Yeah. This bridge moment here is enormously manipulative.
Absolutely.
It is very, very not cool for him to do this, especially when there is information that she is choosing not to share with him.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And it's like, you should respect that, right? And instead of respecting it, he does the thing where he pushes it over the line by doing a very manipulative thing, which is like, I'm going to jump if you don't tell me. And we were talking about how before some of the things that get the strongest negative reactions against the male characters in this movie is when we recognize that behavior in our past selves. This is very much shit that I would have done at 19 or 20 years old, right? Very much big, dramatic, like, I'm going to put myself in harm's way to get what I want from you sort of behavior, or at least make you think that I'm going to put myself in harm's way.
Yeah.
Do something dangerous if you don't do what I want.
Yeah.
Right?
Here he's clearly like joking around and playing around, but
Yeah.
I, as someone who's experienced depression for a good portion of my life, there are times when I have weaponized that against someone. I don't think I've ever like flat out been like, I'm going to kill myself if blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But I've used it in a manipulative way.
Yeah, and even when it's being jokey and cutesy, and you know he's probably not going to do it, still fucking extremely uncool, right? Because then it's like, because in her mind, right, it's like, he's goofing around. He could fucking slip and fall, right?
I wish he had slipped.
And then it's going to feel like
I wish he had
this is-
slipped. We would have just skipped all this bullshit.
Right.
The movie would be over.
I honestly, what I really, really would have liked here, it would have fundamentally changed the movie and probably made it worse. But what I wanted from Cindy's character here is to just be like, fucking do it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you. You're going to have to jump. Because if you call his bluff, then see what he does, right? And it's like that you render that weapon powerless if you call him on it and are basically like, okay, fucking do it then, right? I have decided not to tell you this thing, and you threatening to jump off a bridge isn't going to make me do it, right? So it's like, fine, right? But she doesn't do that because some part of her is infatuated with him, right? And does have that draw to him. And she does want him in her life, and I think she's afraid if she calls him on it, right, and takes the game out of it, then he's not going to want to be around her anymore, right? And so it's like, that's the difficulty there. But I really wish I was like, Cindy girl, you got to just be like, fucking jump, see if I care, you know?
Push him.
Yeah.
Do it. Fucking do it.
Well, that's a crime. If he jumps himself, you're not culpable.
And the next thing that happens also just fucking infuriated me.
Yeah.
He's climbed back over the railing. They're sitting and they're talking on the bridge. Like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And she breaks down and starts crying, walks away, and he doesn't follow her.
Yeah.
He stays behind. He starts punching like the fence or whatever, and he makes it about him.
Yep.
He doesn't follow her and try to comfort her and be there for her.
Yep.
And that pissed me off so much.
Me too.
Then again, in the very next scene, she's at an OBGYN clinic to get an abortion.
Yeah.
And he's sitting there in the waiting room.
He is there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I do want to say, I don't know how intentional this was. The OBGYN performing the abortion is a man. This guy skeeved me the fuck out.
Why does he look like he plays bass in a death metal band? He's got
the goatee.
He's got this goatee, this like really thin goatee that goes all the way down and then also under his chin. And it's like frizzy and like bleach blonde.
Yeah.
And or maybe it's white because he's a little older, but it looked like it had been bleached to me. And I was like, does this dude fucking play in like some band called Corpse Grinder or some shit? Like, what is happening?
And his voice is like, yeah, breathe slowly.
Yeah.
I know it's uncomfortable. It's like, dude, this is not a JOI audio.
Yeah. And to be clear, he is not portrayed as creepy or predatory or weird in any way.
Yeah, I don't think the movie is intentionally doing that.
Yes, the script treats this doctor as a good doctor, right? When she, in a second here, tells them to stop the procedure, he's immediately like, okay, I'm stopping, I'm leaving the room, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, and all of that, the stuff that he's saying to her and like what he's doing is all very professional, good doctor behavior. There is just something about the combination of this dude's face and voice where you're like, she's not safe. Yeah,
it's he might as well be using the horrible metal instruments from Dead Ringers, directed by David Cronenberg. He might as well be like, he might as well be doing the procedure with those.
Yeah.
It's horrifying.
It's very strange casting.
Yeah.
But yeah, and yes, in the scene she is gonna get an abortion. She then something changes in her, and she decides to go through with having the baby.
Yeah.
It's sort of unclear to me what causes this, and I don't necessarily think that it needs to be.
I don't
right?
think so either.
But yes, for some reason during this procedure, something about how uncomfortable she feels during the procedure and the other stuff that's going on, the wheels are spinning in her head, and she decides like, no, I'm gonna have this baby.
And the scenes with her and Dean after this, when she comes back into the waiting room and he gets up and follows her outside and they hug, there's no dialogue here either. There's no real discussion. The only, the next big moment of dialogue that we have is they're sitting on the bus on the way home, and Dean says, like, let's do it. Let's be a family. Yeah. So we don't know what their conversation is like. And I love this shot of them sitting in the back of the bus, and he's holding her in his lap with, like, the tacky blue firework upholstery that you see on buses.
Yeah, like on a public bus.
Like on the seats and on the like the back wall of the bus.
Yep.
It was such an evocative image for me.
Yeah, I agree. Really good shot. I mean, overall, this movie looks great, but like this is very well composed. Yeah.
There's a short scene in present day where Cindy gets called to work early the next morning, and so she's hungover and tired.
She kind of seems like she's still drunk.
Yeah. Getting her things together in the future room. Dean's asleep on the floor of the bathroom. She leaves a note for him on the fridge. And then Dean wakes up after she's gone and finds the note, starts drinking and smoking, and calls her a bus. Which is a funny scene where he picks up the phone and he's like, where's the nearest bus station?
Yeah, that did get a laugh out of me.
This is another short flashback scene here where Cindy gets home then basically after the abortion. There's a point where Dean puts his really cool jacket on on her to comfort her. Yes. She gets home with that jacket on and finds that Bobby's left her multiple angry voicemails.
Yes.
That she laughs off.
Yeah. I do like her laughing at him just being a huge dick on the voicemail.
Yeah.
Where she's like, this fucking asshole.
And then he calls a few times and is like, we're gonna find him, we're gonna beat the shit out of him. And so she tries to call him at his work, and while this is happening, he does end up getting jumped by Bobby and a couple of Bobby's friends.
Yes. Yeah. Dean gets his shit rocked here, and while I hate Bobby more than I hate Dean,
it's a little satisfying.
It's a little gratifying to see him get a beat down at this point in the movie.
In the present, Cindy is back at work at her doctor's office, and her doctor's like gonna move clinic to a new location.
Yeah.
And he wants her to come along. And so he proposes to her that she should like get an apartment in the city.
And commute home on the weekends and there for the weekdays.
And he's like, and you wouldn't be lonely. We could get dinner.
Yeah. We could hang out sometimes and get dinner and stuff. And it's like, okay, this is extremely uncool.
Yeah. She's like, I'm married.
Yes. And also, like, what she says is I'm married. And then she also says, and this is one of the things that I thought was very heartbreaking. I haven't talked about it very much, but I think listeners will be able to tell just from how I've been speaking about these two. Cindy is the character that I empathize with and kind of feel for the most in this movie by far.
Yeah,
right? I feel very kind of protective of Cindy, and I'm like, any poor decisions that she makes and any character flaws that she has, I feel like are kind of not her fault. They're the fault of her like abusive father and kind of shitty circumstances, right? To some extent, right? And so in this moment, she does have a line where she says, I'm married. And then she says, I thought you wanted me there because I'm good at my job.
Oh, yeah.
And that was such a moment where I was like, oh, fuck, right? Because it's like everything with her relationship with Dean is like falling apart, right? And then on top of that, she's basically realizing she's having the same experience in the workplace where it's like this man is manipulating me, right? To try and get what he wants out of me. And I thought I was just doing good, right? I thought I was just a good nurse, right? And that's why I was being given this opportunity. And it's like, so Michelle Williams is a phenomenal actress and she plays so well that she is so devastated because it makes her question her own self-worth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, am I good at my job or does this guy just want to fuck me, right? And it's not, they don't dwell on it for very long because this movie is very subtle, but it was a moment where I was like, man, like that is really heart-wrenching. So yeah. Fuck this doctor, I hate him.
Fuck him, yeah, he sucks. And he tries to backpedal with like, oh, I was totally not trying to make a pass at you or anything. And it's like, come on, man.
Yeah. And it's really half-assed the way he tries to kind of like, he doesn't even apologize.
Yeah.
And then he's like, well, on to work or whatever. And it's like, no, fuck you. Like, you know what you were doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Dean shows up here. He's taking a bus back to Cindy's work. And he's clearly drunk.
Yeah.
And shows up to like the registration lady at the front and is asking for Cindy. And she goes, "Oh, you must be Dean."
Yeah.
And Ryan Gosling gets this look on his face where he's like, what the fuck's that supposed to mean?
Great little moment of acting from
so good.
Yeah, it's a really great little look that he has.
And as someone who has worked in a medical office with a lot of women who do talk about their significant others and their relationships and stuff like that, something that I rang true for my experience.
Recognizable moment to you, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So then, Cindy does come out and is basically like, her first approach is basically like, I'm at work, like, let's not do this here, go home.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, which is
correct decision.
Reasonable. Yep.
They walk out into the parking lot, and on the way out, one of the ladies working back there says, "Don't let him brainwash you."
Yeah.
And they
which on the one hand, kudos to this lady. On the other hand, maybe mind your own business a little bit.
Yeah.
It's definitely not helping.
They fight in the parking lot, and I don't even necessarily remember what they say here. They just bicker back and forth because they eventually go back inside.
Mm-hmm.
And Dean kind of forces his way back into the back part of the employee area.
Yeah, because
of the
Michelle
clinic.
Williams is basically just trying to disengage from the situation.
Yeah.
She's trying to do what she did earlier with stopping the car and going into the woods. She's basically like, I just need to get away, right? And he's not letting her. He follows her, right? And she thinks by going back to the employees only area at this healthcare facility, right, that he'll be stopped, and he is not. He just continues to pursue her. Yeah.
They keep fighting and bickering, and she just says, I'm done, over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
They sort of start raising their voices and attracting the attention of the other people working in the office. Dean just becomes a child here and starts knocking stuff over.
Yeah. Which is in response to, I think, a great line from Michelle Williams, where she's like, she's talking about how he's not a man, right? She starts the insults, because the fighting is getting heated.
Yeah,
the insults start getting pretty low, right? It starts getting pretty venomous, right? And so she starts insulting his manhood, right? And is like, oh, like, you're not a man, like I'm a bigger man than you are, you fucking cunt, is the thing she says to him. And I was like, damn.
Good.
Which also I was kind of like, yeah, you go, girl, you tell him.
Yeah, good usage of the C word in this movie.
But then his reaction to that is like, oh, you want me to be a man?
Is this what a man would do?
Right.
Yeah.
And he just starts knocking shit over. Yeah.
The doctor comes in and is like, I don't remember exactly what he says, but the doctor's trying to stop him. And Gosling, like, shoves him up against the wall and sort of chokes him for a second and then backs off. And then the doctor says, think about your wife. And then he clocks him in the face.
Yeah.
I did like that a lot.
Yes, especially having just established that this doctor is a scumbag. You do not feel bad at all that he gets punched in the face, which I love.
Yeah.
You're like, no, yeah, this guy did deserve that.
And this is the peak of the emotional conflict of this movie. And yet it is so quiet and small and still devastating in its own way.
Yeah.
When Dean shows up to this clinic drunk and is being aggressive and combative in a very, not in a very showy way. It's very low key.
Right.
And I think it's just a testament to the writing and the performances, like for the entire movie.
Mm-hmm.
How affecting this moment is.
Yeah. I will say, like, even when they do raise their voices, and like he does punch a guy, which is like a big thing. I will say it is still, to your point, like subdued and grounded and realistic, right? Yeah.
The doctor fires Cindy. And which again, fuck this guy.
Yeah.
Dean is like, she didn't do anything. Take it out on me.
Yeah. Which it's like, also, it is your fault though. Like, which I think he knows and is reckoning with in that moment, right? But it's like, no, you can't now take back the consequences that your actions have had on her.
Yeah.
Right. Which is what he's trying to do.
Yeah. They walk out in the parking lot. Michelle Williams gives a great line reading here where she goes, I want a fucking divorce.
Yeah.
And it's so good. That is the final, like, that is the peak of this conflict. And she does it. She sells it so well. Ryan Gosling throws away his wedding ring and just like chucks it into the bushes, and they go looking for it together.
Yeah.
Which is such a good moment. It's such a good encapsulation of them trying to find their marriage and find what they had lost. And I don't know that they actually, did they find it? I don't know that they find it.
I don't know that it specifies.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there is the moment of them both searching. Yeah.
Yeah. And I really like it. It's really good. This is a good movie that is well made, and I enjoy it because it makes me feel like shit. Flashback sequence with dinner with Cindy's parents. Dean has a black eye from the beating. We get a little bit about Dean's backstory here. He doesn't talk to his mother. His father is a janitor and a musician, and he's a high school dropout. It's a classic awkward dinner with the parents of your significant other.
Yes.
And of course, Dean, Cindy's father is not at all impressed by this guy.
Yes.
And you Cindy's dad is an asshole, but you kind of get it.
Right. Yeah. Because we as the audience are not tremendously impressed with Dean either. But yes, it is one of those things where it's like the movie does do a very good job of not over explaining or over demonstrating that Cindy's dad is maybe less than thrilled about Dean. Mm-hmm. It is handled very, very subtly. But you still very clearly get the vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They go upstairs to her childhood bedroom afterwards, and this is where he shows her the mix CD with the song that they played earlier in the film that's like going to be their song. And they're snuggling on the bed. There's a line here that I want to point out from Dean that, again, I think is a good encapsulation of his character, and his central flaw is, I'm not good enough for you, but nobody is. So as long as that's the case, I want the job.
Yeah.
Where he completely idolizes her and puts her on a pedestal, but is also, he's very complacent with the type of person that he is, and his role in the relationship is like, oh, I just need to be there.
Right.
But he's not there.
Right. And also I think you're totally right about the I'm not good enough for you, but nobody is, the whole elevating her, his idea of who she is, right? It's that thing that he's doing in the future scenes that is so infuriating, where it's like he's trying to make her be the person that he thinks she should be, right? As opposed to just like acknowledging who she is and loving her for that person, right? And yeah, you're right. It's phrased as a romantic thing here, right? But then it's like when you interrogate that, when you actually think about what it means, it's like a problematic expectation to put on your partner, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. This is then we transition back to the present. We're cutting back and forth really quickly here. We're getting to the end of the movie. They pick up Frankie from Grandma and Grandpa's house, her parents' house, and Cindy goes in to hug her, but Frankie runs over to go see Dean and is shouting, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy!" And Cindy is just like, the look on Michelle Williams' face is total disgust, and she looks so hurt that her daughter just wants to see Dean.
Yeah.
And you feel for her, man.
Yeah.
You're right. I think ultimately, this movie is about people can be in love with each other and also not at all right for each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is partially true in their relationship. I think they have love for each other. I think they have passion for each other, but it also doesn't manifest itself in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And they are constantly using other things, whether unintentionally, without meaning to, like they're using other things to lord over each other and weaponize things against each other. We've both been very critical towards Dean.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's because, like you said, I recognize a lot of Dean's qualities in myself and,
right.
and in my past.
Yeah.
I do feel for Cindy a lot.
Yeah.
But Cindy is also has her issues too.
Right. Yeah. She's very closed off. She's not good at communicating. Like, yeah.
And
she's not blameless.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of those moments where you do feel for her, and it's also just sad to see her also feel like that she has to use that she has to fight for Frankie's attention.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And weaponize that relationship with her daughter.
Yeah.
Over Dean, because to Dean's credit, he does love Frankie, and he did step up, and he does care for her like she was his own child. But again, he's also weaponizing that relationship too.
Yeah, and I think he is genuinely good with Frankie, right? Yeah. Which is that makes it all more complex and difficult, right? That, he is to some extent kind of a good dad, and so that makes it hard for Michelle Williams to be like, this guy's like a fucking deadbeat loser asshole who I should just leave, right? Because there's the whole thing of like, then I will be depriving my kid of at least some time with this guy who is admittedly a really good dad,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They go inside. There's another funny moment here where they lock Grandpa on the porch.
Yeah, and he doesn't have his oxygen tank. Yeah. And I'm like, is this guy gonna fucking die?
Yeah.
Which again, he was a huge abusive tyrant to his family, so maybe if he doesn't have his oxygen and he just keels over on this porch, no great loss. However, it is insane that they lock him out of the house without his oxygen.
Yeah. They're in the kitchen and they're discussing the possibility about getting a divorce, and Dean says, what about Frankie? We have someone else to think about. You're being selfish.
Yeah.
And Cindy is just like, we're just not good for each other.
Mm-hmm.
Then they keep bickering and fighting, and eventually they just kind of hug while Cindy's crying into Dean's chest.
Which, when he approaches her to embrace her, she keeps saying no, 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 no when he's coming towards her, because she knows that if he comes over there and she lets him comfort her, it's going to be harder for her to stick to the decision that she has made. And in my notes at this point, I did write in all caps, Cindy, no, get out of there, girl. Because I was like, don't fucking let him do that, right? You have made the correct decision. Like, don't let him change your mind. And thankfully she does not. But it is a moment in the movie where I was feeling a lot of like palpable like tension, where I was like, I swear to God, if she takes him back, you know. But yeah, and I do like the moment of her kind of refusing his comfort, him offering it anyway, and her sort of being like unmoved by it in her decision, but embracing the comfort of it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This final sequence here is intercut with a flashback to Cindy and Dean getting married at like the courthouse.
Yeah.
Very, very low key courthouse wedding. Cindy's visibly pregnant at this point. I do want to point out, because we mentioned Dean's sick fucking jacket, his like light blue pinstripe suit with the burgundy tie in this. Very nice look.
He's looking good. He's dripped out.
He's looking like he stepped off the set of The Nice Guys or something. It's one of those like really nice 70s suits. Or maybe like a Saul Goodman suit. Which Saul Goodman's tacky suits are kind of slick, I gotta say.
Yeah.
So this is all intercut with this final scene as sad music from Grizzly Bear plays. Really fucking sad song from Grizzly Bear. Dean says, you said for better or worse, and this is over them reciting their vows. He says, you said for better or for worse, and this is my worst, but I'm gonna get better. They're trying to make up. There's a great another moment of editing here where they kiss. You may now kiss the bride during the wedding, and then they embrace, they kiss, and then it cuts to them in the present, pulling apart in the kitchen.
Yeah.
I'm in so much pain right now. It's such a painful moment. I forgot to mention, it's not really important to this movie, but important to this scene. This weekend, this is 4th of July weekend.
Yeah.
So Dean steps out of the house and starts walking down the street as people are setting off fireworks further down the street. And I don't know why, but it adds so much to the atmosphere.
It really does.
Tone of this scene.
Yeah, it's like in Boogie Nights when Cosmo's setting off the firecrackers at Alfred Molina's place. It's just the explosions in the background just put you a little bit, it makes you a little uneasy, right? And everything that's happening, it sort of like feels, the emotions feel elevated because there's literal explosions happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Frankie chases after him, shouting, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy."
Yeah.
And Dean tells her to go back to her mom.
Yeah.
Cindy picks her up and holds Frankie as Dean just like walks down the street towards the fireworks, and the movie ends.
Yeah.
And leaves us in that sticky, awful feeling of ambiguity and pain and suffering, and you start reflecting about your life and your life choices while more Grizzly Bear plays over the credits.
Yeah, and then after the Grizzly Bear ends, over the credits, we get a reprise of the ukulele rendition of "You Always Hurt the One You Love," which Ryan Gosling sings earlier in the movie. Yeah.
Great ending. Holy shit.
I will say, real banger of an ending here.
Yeah.
This is the perfect way to end this movie.
Yeah.
I think they stuck the landing here in a big way.
Yeah. Justus.
Yes.
I actually don't know what you're going to say here.
Yeah.
I've had a really great conversation with you about this. I want to say, first of all, because we didn't really have a mental health check-in because I just saw you a day ago.
That's true.
I appreciate you being so open and honest in this episode about your own your relationship with the Podmaster and your own relationship with yourself and your masculinity and your past on this very emotionally fraught episode of the greatest movie ever made.
It's a touchy-feely one. Thanks, man. I appreciate that you appreciate that.
So Justus
Yeah.
is Blue Valentine the greatest movie ever made?
David. So I had never seen this movie before. This is my first time with this movie. I waited until my verdict for this because I kind of wanted to keep my cards close to my chest here on this movie, which I think I've done relatively well.
Yeah.
Through our conversation on it. I did want to say we are probably due for a reprise of a segment that I introduced, which is the Justice Cry Count on movies like
Oh,
these.
shit. Okay.
Yeah. So we've now reached the end. So I'm just going to give you the answer after you guess.
All right.
How many times do you think I, a person who cries a lot during movies, cried during this movie?
2.
The David's guess is 2. The cry count for this movie, David, is big fat 0.
Oh, okay.
And that leads me into my verdict. I think this movie is technically immaculately well executed. I think it looks beautiful. I think it is very well directed. I think the lighting is incredible. The score is incredible. The performances are without reproach. It is a very good movie. I did not enjoy this movie. And it's not because it made me feel bad. I like movies that make me feel bad. It's because it made me feel nothing. And the reason for that, and I think that this is because of where I am coming from as a human being approaching this movie, as a person who has been in a happy, committed relationship for 12 years, I didn't feel bad for these characters. I was frustrated at them because it was so clear to me that the foundation of their relationship was built on infatuation and passion and puppy love, and that they never got to the point where they were mature enough to have an actual loving relationship with each other. And when the movie in the later scenes is trying to tell me that it is tragic that these two people's relationship is falling apart, my reaction as a viewer was, it's not sad, it's necessary. These people don't belong with each other. They are bad for each other, and they will be better off apart, is sort of how I was feeling the whole time. The happy scenes in the past, when they're being cutesy with each other, manufacture some effective moments of charm. But it doesn't ever feel like love to me. This movie feels loveless. And it's hard to mourn the loss of a love that I never feel the presence of in the first place. Because it feels like these people are drawn to each other because they're Michelle Williams and they're Ryan Gosling and they're both extremely hot. But I never get anything from them. Their chemistry is good, but I never get anything from the story that makes me root for this relationship to succeed. I sort of think that it is built on a foundation of manipulation from Dean's side and passivity from Cindy's side. And then the ultimate failure of it is a continuation of those two things. And while I enjoyed the structure here, the architecture of the film, and cannot fault it from any technical level, emotionally, it just didn't touch me. And I think that that's not an issue with the movie necessarily. I kind of think it's an issue with me because I don't think I'm in a position as a person to connect with the tragedy of a breakup of two people who are bad at being in a relationship with each other, because I'm so far removed from that experience in my own life. Which sounds like, I feel like that makes me sound like an asshole, where I'm like, oh, an unhappy relationship, can't relate, right? And if it makes, and if I am an asshole for feeling this way, then I guess I'm an asshole. But like, it didn't work for me. And I think that's okay. It's okay for a movie to be for some people, and resonate harder for some people and not with others. But the core of this thing rung hollow for me personally. And for that reason, it is not the greatest movie ever made. I feel really bad saying all this. I feel like I've really just fucked up your whole day. I hope you're not mad at me. But if you are, it's okay, because I was mad at you during the Prince of Darkness episode. So I guess I'm owed some comeuppance. If you want to yell at me a little bit.
I'm saving that anger for when we do Aliens and you inevitably say no.
Well, I've never seen that movie, so let's not put the cart before the horse. David, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, because I feel like my own are in some ways tainted by my own refusal to engage with this movie on its terms.
I get that, because you're watching this whole movie and you're like, this could never be me. I love my wife.
Right.
We're great.
Right. And that's one of the things that's so frustrating about it, because it's like, if I were either of these people, there are a million decisions I would make differently. And I feel like I was thinking about that more than I was thinking about how they feel, you know? And again, so maybe it's a me problem. But David, I need to know, is Blue Valentine the greatest movie ever made?
Justus, this movie stirs up so many different emotions in me.
Mm-hmm.
As someone who hasn't had, I will fully admit, has not had a ton of relationship experience. I've had some very short relationships over the course of my life, but I haven't felt love yet, really. I haven't had a long-term experience with a partner yet. And coming to this movie and watching this movie, I see the other paths that my life could have taken. And I see the flaws in my own personality and the things that Michelle Williams does or Ryan Gosling does in this movie that I used to do, and things that I'm ashamed of, and things that I don't want to want to make them part of my personality. I just turned 31 last year, and I feel like in some ways I'm still discovering myself, and I'm still discovering what kind of relationships I want to have with people, friends or romantic relationships. And this movie shows me that the tragedy of having a mundane, loveless relationship where you and your partner are circling the drain and going through the motions, and day in and day out, falling out of love with each other slowly but surely. That tragedy is just as tragic and dramatic as a relationship that crashes and burns very dramatically, and very quickly. There are two endings to this movie. There is, they break up, and there's also they stay together.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, both of those endings are equally tragic in their own way. The performances are stunning. There is not a single moment in this movie that is played for melodramatics. There's not a single moment in this movie that rings hollow for me, that rings inauthentic.
Yeah.
From either of these actors. This is incredible work from two great actors, two of our greatest actors. I think it is beautifully shot. It is so evocative in places with the cinematography. It makes great use of its locations. The Future Room, for example. The music is great. I love the structure of it. It is a slow, long, rock hammer to the spinal column. It slowly wears me down. By the end, I am totally broken. It is a near masterpiece, and as good as a debut feature can be. This is his first movie, and if this was my first movie, I would be so happy.
Yeah.
For all those reasons, I gotta say, I think Blue Valentine is the greatest movie ever made.
Yeah, okay.
It's so fucking good.
Yeah.
And it's one that makes me I think like a lot of great movies, I am watching the movie and I'm enjoying the movie and I am being affected by the movie, and I am also doing self-reflection while watching it and thinking about my life, my choices, who I am as a person.
Yeah.
And I think it's just beautifully done and masterfully done.
Yeah. That was all very well put and eloquently put. And I just want to say, I know we have a strong difference of opinion on this one. That's okay. It's okay to feel differently about the movies that we cover. And I just want to say, I am really glad that this movie is this impactful and important to you and that you enjoy it so much. Even though it didn't have the same impact for me, it makes me really happy that this movie works this well for you. You know? I wish it worked better for me, but the fact that it hits like this for you, I think is something that I can get on board with celebrating.
Yeah, and like you said, I think this how people will react to this movie, I think, is so tied to their experiences and their personality and their relationships. So that's Blue Valentine.
That's Blue Valentine.
And that's the bummer episode of Valentine's month.
I know we're going to be more on the same page for the next movie that we're covering, David.
But our next movie is also about a married couple experiencing strain in their relationship and their marriage. Justus, we're talking about True Lies from 1994, directed by Big Jim, James motherfucking Cameron.
And who is this movie starring, David?
Starring the greatest actor in the world, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
That's right,
and Jamie Lee Curtis.
Oh, man. And one of the greatest actresses in the world, Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah.
Holy shit, we are going to have such a great time talking about True Lies. I am so excited. This episode, the True Lies conversation, is going to be like a nice, soothing tonic to all of the weird, conflicting, icky emotions that Blue Valentine brought up. It's just going to be a nice little balm that we're going to lay on.
Yeah, a really interesting film to talk about because we're both fans of Cameron.
Oh, yeah.
We're both fans of Schwarzenegger.
Yep.
Did not expect this to be the first movie from either of those two filmmakers and auteurs that we would be talking about on the show.
But I'm kind of glad that it is, because this is, I think the first Cameron and first Schwarzenegger movie I ever saw. I saw True Lies as a kid, and I'm pretty sure it was the first thing I saw from either of them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So we hope you will join us for that. And in the meantime, please leave us comments, like the show, tweet the show, comment the show. I already said that.
Follow, subscribe.
Share it with your friends, or like Crimson Jihad in True Lies, we will rain fire on one U.S. city each week until our demands are met.
That's right. For the purposes of any FBI or CIA or Homeland Security people who might be listening, parody, satire, parody.
Until then, we hope you enjoy yourselves and have a good week.
We hope you have a much better week than the people in Blue Valentine.
Jesus Christ. Talk to your partner.
Yes.
Communicate with your partner.
Yes.
Just check in on them. Make sure they're doing okay. Don't try to rekindle your love by going to a tacky sex motel.
Or if it's something that you're both on board with and have talked about beforehand, then do that.
Yeah, if you have like a healthy relationship and you're like, hey, let's go fuck in a future room,
right?
Then, go ahead.
Just don't spring that on them.
Yeah. Talk about things. Till then, we love you so much. And as always, later dipshits.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of The Greatest Movie Ever Made. Please remember to leave us a rating and a review, and to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. We appreciate you supporting the show and spreading the word. Tell your friends to listen, tell your enemies to listen, tell your mom to listen. If your neighbor has an unsecured Bluetooth speaker, connect to it and play an episode. You can follow us on social media at TGMEM_podcast. And if you've got a movie that you want us to talk about, send us an email at thegreatestmoviepodcast@gmail.com.